The first sign that humanity was no longer alone came without warning, fanfare, or hope. At 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, every deep space telescope on Earth, Mars, and Luna detected the same impossible distortion beyond the orbit of Neptune. It looked, at first, like light bending in the wrong direction. Then the darkness split open, and an armada emerged. Hundreds of ships poured from the tear in space in absolute formation. They were vast, angular, and black enough to seem carved from the void itself. Their hulls reflected no sunlight. Instead, they carried lines of crimson radiance along their edges, like veins glowing beneath armored skin. At the center of the formation drifted something so enormous that the sensors at first rejected it as error. It was longer than several cities placed end to end, crowned with spires and layered plating, as if a fortress had learned to move. Within 3 minutes, every military network on Earth had shifted to emergency lockdown. Within 5, all civilian broadcasts were interrupted. Phones dimmed. Televisions flickered. Billboards went black. Aircraft cockpit displays froze. On subway screens, hospital monitors, classroom projectors, and traffic signs, the same image appeared, a tall figure standing in a chamber of dark metal, lit from below by blood-red light. Its face was narrow and severe, its eyes silver and unblinking. The being wore no helmet, no insignia that humans could read, and no expression that suggested doubt. When it spoke, every person on Earth heard the words in their own language. "This is High Executive Vacor of the Galactic Council. The species of Earth has violated expansion protocols reserved for sanctioned civilizations. Your settlements beyond your cradle world constitute unlawful territorial reach. You are ordered to surrender all orbital defenses, submit all interplanetary assets, and await administrative occupation. Compliance will preserve your population. Defiance will result in eradication." No one moved for several seconds after the message ended. Then the world exploded into noise. In New York, traders abandoned terminals to call home. In Lagos, crowds gathered in the streets, staring upward as if the ships might already be there. In Delhi, churches, mosques, and temples filled before dawn. Across Luna Station Helios, miners and engineers stood shoulder to shoulder in silent disbelief, watching the same message replay on mess hall screens. On Mars, the first settlers born off Earth listened with pale faces and clenched jaws. At Earth Orbital Defense Command, Commander Elias Rain watched the transmission in a room full of officers who had trained their entire lives for war and had never looked so helpless. "Telemetry," Elias said. His voice cut cleanly through the paralysis. Lieutenant Mara Ilian blinked, dragged herself back to her station, and answered. "Primary fleet holding beyond Neptune. Additional signatures still emerging. Count is past 400 confirmed capital-class hulls. Support craft unknown. Any weapons lock? Not yet." Elias stared at the tactical display suspended above the central pit. Blue icons marked human assets, orbital defense platforms, carrier groups, lunar batteries, Martian patrol craft, mining tugs retrofitted for escort duty. They looked pitiful against the expanding wall of red. "How long until they can reach inter-system engagement range?" he asked. A systems analyst swallowed. "At their current acceleration? Less than 9 hours." Someone at the rear muttered. "That's impossible." Elias did not bother turning toward him. Impossible had already arrived. He was 42, broad-shouldered, and graying at the temples in a way that made him seem older when he was still and younger when he moved. He had spent 20 years in uniform, first as a pilot, then as a tactician, and finally as the officer trusted to coordinate the defense of Earth's orbital sphere. He was not a dreamer. He was not a politician. He was a man who believed that panic was contagious and discipline had to spread faster. "Open a channel to Geneva," he said. "Full Defense Council. Level black." Within moments, the secure chamber lit with holographic figures from across Earth's fractured but suddenly unified leadership. Presidents, premiers, military chiefs, corporate bloc representatives from Mars, the governor of Luna, all dragged into the same room by fear. A woman from the Pacific Union spoke first. "Can we fight them?" No one answered immediately. An older man from the African Federation said, "That is what we need to know now, Commander. Not morale. Numbers." Elias kept his eyes on the fleet display. "Numbers say no." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. He continued before anyone could mistake honesty for surrender. "Their largest vessel alone carries more masts than our 3 heaviest shipyards combined. Their formation discipline suggests centralized command and combat synchronization far beyond anything we've seen. If they engage conventionally, we lose orbital control almost immediately." "So that's it," snapped a Martian delegate. "We kneel because they flew in with bigger guns?" Elias finally turned to face them. "I said we lose a conventional fight. I did not say we were finished." Before anyone could press him, the main screen flashed again. A second transmission. Vacor reappeared, closer this time, the angle lower, making him seem as though he stood over the entire planet. "You have 1 rotation of your homeworld to comply," he said. "At the end of that interval, your answer will be taken from your actions, not your words." Then the image vanished. No dramatic cutoff. No distortion. Just absence. In the command room, air systems hummed. Consoles clicked. A junior officer crossed himself before realizing anyone could see. Geneva broke first. "We cannot risk extinction," said one leader. "If surrender preserves lives, we must consider it. Occupation is not preservation," another replied. "It is slavery with procedure." "They mentioned colonies," said Luna's governor. "What happens to Mars?" "To us?" A cold answer came from intelligence. "Administrative occupation means disarmament, resource seizure, population management. Minimum." The room sharpened. People sat straighter. Fear had found shape. Elias stepped toward the central holotable. "They did not come to negotiate. They came to demonstrate certainty. That matters." The Secretary General frowned. "Explain." "An enemy that's strong doesn't issue ultimatums because it needs permission," Elias said. "It issues them because it expects obedience. That expectation becomes a weakness." One of the military chiefs gave a bitter laugh. "You found a weakness in an empire parked beyond Neptune?" "I found an assumption," Elias said. "That humanity scares easily. That we value survival so much we'll hand them our throat." "And do we?" asked the Secretary General. Elias let the question hang. He thought of Mars, where children had grown up under a pale sky because Earth had not been enough. He thought of Luna's first generation, who had buried friends in regolith and still kept digging. He thought of every century in which humans had been told to stay in their place by kings, nations, machines, famine, plague, and each other. "We value survival," he said at last. "But not at the price of becoming property." Hours passed in argument, contingency, and dread. Civil defense grids activated. Fleets received sealed orders. Media channels were restored under emergency authority. Public unrest spread, but so did resolve. Volunteers flooded recruitment servers even when there was nowhere to send them yet. At 11:40 Universal Time Coordinated, a final situation report arrived from Deep Tracking. The alien fleet had begun moving. No more warnings. No more speeches. Just motion. The command room dimmed as the tactical projection updated. Red markers advanced in perfect silence across the black. Elias placed both hands on the edge of the holotable and looked at the people waiting for him to say what came next. Some wanted reassurance. Others wanted a miracle. A few wanted permission to despair. He gave them none. "Transmit to all defense sectors," he said. Mara looked up. "Message content, sir?" Elias watched the red tide drawing closer to home. Then he answered, calm as iron. "Humanity acknowledges receipt of the ultimatum." He paused. "And refuses." The word refuses spread faster than panic. Within minutes, every major broadcast carried the same clipped statement from Earth Orbital Defense Command. There were no speeches, no rallying music, no promises of victory, just the decision. Humanity had answered. And the answer was no. In the hours that followed, the world steadied, not because fear vanished, but because it found direction. People who had spent the first shock and confusion now moved with purpose. Governments sealed borders not to isolate, but to organize. Civil defense networks came online. Hospitals expanded capacity. Orbital yards accelerated construction schedules that suddenly felt absurdly slow. Above it all, the alien fleet continued its silent advance. At Defense Command, Elias Rain stood over a rotating projection of the inner solar system. The red mass had crossed Uranus's orbit. Their speed was no longer theoretical. It was measured, tracked, undeniable. Lieutenant Mara Ilian broke the quiet. "They haven't responded to the refusal." "They will," Elias said. "They just don't need to hurry." A thin line of tension ran through the room. Everyone understood what that meant. Power on that scale did not rush. It closed in. A secure channel chimed. Geneva again. Elias accepted. The holographic chamber flickered into place, filled with strained faces. The Secretary General spoke first this time, voice clipped and direct. "Commander, we need options. Refusal is a statement. It is not a strategy." Elias nodded once. "We're working on one." "Working?" a Martian representative snapped. "They're 3 hours from engagement range." "Closer to 4," Elias corrected calmly. "And that difference matters." A woman in a white lab coat leaned forward into the projection. Her dark hair was tied back hastily, and her eyes were sharp with exhaustion rather than fear. "Dr. Amina Solis," she said. "Signal Warfare Division." Elias gestured for her to continue. "We've been analyzing their transmission architecture," Solis said. "The initial broadcast wasn't just a message, it was a systems test. They synchronized across every receiver we have without latency." "Meaning?" asked the Secretary General. "Meaning their fleet is coordinated through a centralized signal framework. Not fully centralized, but heavily dependent on high-bandwidth command links. Their formation discipline isn't just training, it's networked control." Elias watched her closely. "You're suggesting we can disrupt it." "I'm suggesting we might fracture it," she said. "Not destroy, not disable entirely. But if we introduce interference at the right frequency, we could degrade coordination, break formation, force them into autonomous operation." "And then?" someone asked. Solis didn't hesitate. "Then they stop being perfect." Silence settled again, but this time it carried a different weight. A military advisor leaned in. "You're proposing we attack their communications backbone." "With what?" "We've never even seen their protocols before today." Solis met his stare. "We don't need to understand everything. We need to find a pattern and exploit it. Their first transmission gave us a foothold. It's not much, but it's something." Elias tapped the edge of the holodeble, pulling up a layered visualization of the alien fleet. Threads of light connected ships to one another, faint but persistent. "Assumptions," he said. "Every system has them. They assume dominance. They assume compliance. And they assume their network can't be challenged by a species like us." He looked back at the council. "That's where we start." A Martian delegate frowned. "Start? We don't have time for a beginning. We don't have time for hesitation either," Elias replied. "So we move while they're still confident." Before anyone could argue further, alarms flared across the command center. Mara's voice cut through the rising noise. "New contacts, multiple small craft detaching from the main formation. Trajectory, inner system." Elias turned sharply. "Probes?" "Too large for probes," she said. "Too small for capital ships. Fast, direct course." The projection updated. Several dozen smaller vessels peeled away from the red mass, accelerating toward Earth and Luna. "Testing us," Elias said quietly. Minutes later, Luna Station Helios transmitted a priority alert. "Unidentified vessels entering local space," the station commander reported, voice tight. "They're not responding to hails." Elias stepped closer to the comm. "Do not engage unless fired upon." Repeat, hold fire. A pause. Then, understood. On the main display, the alien craft slowed as they approached the lunar perimeter. Their movements were precise, almost surgical. They spread out, scanning, mapping, observing. For a moment, it looked like they might simply watch. Then one of them fired. A narrow beam lanced out, silent in vacuum, and struck the outer ring of Helios Station. The structure glowed white for a fraction of a second before rupturing outward. Atmosphere vented in a violent plume. Sections of the station tore free, spinning into the void. The command room froze. No, Mara whispered. More beams followed. Not random. Deliberate. Targeted. Within seconds, Helios Station was gone. The transmission cut to static. On Earth, billions watched the replay before officials could suppress it. The image of humanity's first lunar stronghold unraveling into debris burned itself into memory. Back in Geneva, no one spoke. They didn't need to. The message was clear. Elias exhaled slowly, forcing his voice steady. They're escalating. Controlled demonstration. They want fear, not chaos. And they have it, the Secretary General said hoarsely. Elias shook his head. Not enough. He turned back to Solis. How long? She hesitated. To build a working disruption system? Days. Maybe weeks. We don't have that, Elias said. I know. Another silence. He could feel the weight of every eye on him now. Waiting. Expecting. He made the decision. We don't wait for perfect, he said. We build something functional. Fast. Even partial disruption could buy us time. And if it fails? Someone asked. Elias met the question without flinching. Then we fail trying to fight. He straightened, voice firm. But we're not relying on one move. The room leaned in again. We give them what they expect, Elias continued. Submission. Compliance. We tell them we accept their terms. Shock rippled through the council. You can't be serious. The Martian delegate snapped. I am, Elias said. We delay them. Lower their guard. Bring them closer under controlled conditions. While they prepare for occupation, we prepare for disruption. Solis caught on immediately. A feint. A trap, Elias corrected. The Secretary General studied him. And you're certain they'll believe it? Elias glanced at the tactical display, where the Red Fleet advanced with unbroken confidence. They don't think we're capable of deception at this scale, he said. To them, we're predictable. He paused, then added quietly. Let's prove them wrong. The Council argued, of course. They had to. The risk was enormous. If the aliens saw through the deception, retaliation would be immediate and devastating. But the alternative was already visible in the wreckage of Helios. One by one, resistance gave way to grim agreement. At 14:05 Universal Time Coordinated, a transmission was prepared. Elias stood beside the comm officer as the message was encoded. Simple. Direct. No embellishment. When the signal was ready, Mara looked at him. Your call, sir. He nodded once. Send it. The message carried across the void toward the approaching fleet. On the main screen, the alien formation held steady. Seconds stretched. Then, slowly, the central flagship shifted position. Not a full maneuver, just a subtle realignment, as if something vast had inclined its head. A new transmission opened. Vacor appeared again, his expression unchanged. Wise, he said. Nothing more. The channel closed. In the command room, tension did not ease. It tightened. Because now the real work began. Elias leaned over the holodeble, eyes fixed on the advancing fleet. Begin Phase 1, he said. Behind him, unseen by the enemy, humanity moved. The fleet slowed as it entered Saturn's orbit. Not abruptly, not cautiously, deliberately. The vast formation adjusted with mechanical grace, spreading into layered tiers that filled the darkness with ordered geometry. Ships aligned along invisible axes, each maintaining exact distance from the next, as though guided by a single mind. To human sensors, the pattern looked flawless. To Elias Rain, it looked like dependence. Velocity reduction confirmed, Mara said. They're repositioning for controlled advance toward inner system. Elias nodded. They're preparing for occupation. No one said the word invasion anymore. The aliens hadn't used it. That alone unsettled him more than open hostility would have. On the main display, the alien fleet dominated half the projection now. Human assets clustered closer to Earth, dim blue against the encroaching red. They're still holding formation integrity, Solis said from her station. Her voice carried fatigue sharpened into focus. No signal drift. No latency gaps. Their network is stable. Can you see it? Elias asked. Not directly, she said. But we can map its effects. Command relays, synchronization bursts, distributed control loops. It's not centralized in one node. It's layered. Meaning harder to break. Meaning harder to kill completely, Solis corrected. Not impossible to disrupt. Elias glanced at her. How close are we? She hesitated. Close enough to try, she said. That was not the answer he wanted. But it was the one he expected. Define try, Doctor. Solis tapped her console, bringing up a secondary display. Streams of data scrolled in tight columns, punctuated by pulsing waveforms. We've built a carrier intrusion package based on their initial transmission, she explained. It piggybacks on their own signal architecture. If we inject it at the right moment, it should introduce noise into their coordination protocols. How much noise? Enough to degrade formation response, she said. Ships will lag. Some may desynchronize completely. And their response time? Unknown. Elias studied the projection again. The fleet had begun its inward push, crossing the boundary where Saturn's rings cast long shadows through space. We won't get a second chance, he said. I know. Across the room, a communications officer raised a hand. Incoming directive from Geneva. They want confirmation that we're proceeding with the surrender protocol. Elias didn't look away from the display. Tell them we are. And the fleet? We follow through. He turned slightly, addressing the entire command center. Stand down visible systems. Power signatures to minimum. Weapons offline, at least on their sensors. We look compliant. Mara nodded. All units will hate that order. They'll follow it anyway. Within minutes, human vessels began to dim. Orbital platforms powered down active targeting arrays. Defense grids went quiet. Even the massive carrier groups near Earth reduced their emissions, masking their readiness behind a facade of surrender. From the outside, it looked convincing. From the inside, it felt like holding breath before drowning. Solis moved closer to Elias, lowering her voice. We need them closer. They're coming, he said. Closer than that, she insisted. If we trigger too early, the disruption won't propagate through enough of their network. We need density. Overlap. Elias frowned. You want them inside engagement range. I want them inside vulnerability range. He didn't answer immediately. On the display, the alien fleet advanced past Saturn, its formation tightening again as it adjusted course toward Earth. The central flagship drifted at the core, its red-lit structures glowing faintly against the cold light of the distant sun. How long until they reach Luna? Elias asked. 40 minutes, Mara replied. Too soon. Not soon enough. Elias exhaled slowly. We hold. Solis stiffened. Commander. We hold, he repeated. We need maximum effect. Not a partial disruption. And if they start firing before we're ready? Elias met her eyes. Then we adapt. She didn't argue again. Not because she agreed, but because she understood. Time stretched. The alien fleet crossed into the inner system without deviation. No further warnings. No additional strikes. Their silence carried more weight than threats ever could. On Earth, The skies remained empty, but every person knew what approached. Emergency networks broadcast calm instructions. Shelters filled. Power grids stabilized under military oversight. The planet waited. At Luna's former orbit, debris from Helios station still drifted, a scattered grave. The alien ships passed through it without slowing. Mara's voice cut in. They're adjusting formation again. Smaller vessels moving ahead of the main body. Screening units, Elias said. Clearing approach. Solis leaned over her console, watching the data spike. Their signal density is increasing. More cross-linking between ships. Elias felt it too, not in the data, but in the pattern. The fleet was tightening, reinforcing its coordination as it entered contested space. They're consolidating control, he said. Which means? Mara asked. Which means now? Solis froze. Now? Elias nodded. If we wait any longer, they'll adapt their network. We hit them while they're still transitioning. She hesitated for half a second, then moved. Initializing intrusion package, she said. Routing through deep space relay nodes. On the main display, a faint line appeared, tracing a path from Earth's outer communications satellites toward the approaching fleet. Signal injection in 10 seconds, Solis said. The room went silent. Elias rested his hands on the edge of the console, eyes fixed on the red formation. 5 seconds. Mara whispered something under her breath. Elias didn't catch it. 3. The fleet continued its advance, flawless, unstoppable. 2. Solis's fingers hovered over the final command. 1. Execute. The signal launched. Nothing happened. For a heartbeat, the fleet remained unchanged. Then, a flicker. Not visible at first glance, but clear on the data feeds. One ship lagged a fraction of a second behind its assigned vector. Another corrected too sharply. A third drifted off alignment before snapping back. Solis leaned forward. We have interference. Elias didn't move. Scale? Local spreading, she said. Their synchronization loops are compensating, but... A sharp spike cut her off. Wait, she said. It's cascading. On the display, the formation began to ripple. Ships that had moved with perfect precision now showed slight delays. Formation lines wavered. Smaller vessels adjusted out of sequence. A few drifted too close to their neighbors. Maintain pressure, Elias ordered. Keep the signal active. We're pushing as hard as we can, Solis replied. Any more and we risk detection. They already know something's wrong, Elias said. Make it worse. The disruption intensified. Two mid-sized ships veered toward each other, their courses misaligned by fractions that became meters, then kilometers. They collided. The impact was silent in space, but the visual was unmistakable. Hulls crumpled. Energy flared. Debris scattered outward in a widening cloud. For the first time, the alien fleet broke. Mara stared at the display. They're losing cohesion. Not all of them, Elias said. At the center of the formation, the flagship remained steady. Unaffected. Solis saw it too. It's isolated from the disruption. Independent control loop. Of course it is, Elias muttered. Around it, chaos spread. Ships struggled to maintain position. Some fired thrusters too late. Others overcorrected. The perfect symmetry unraveled into something jagged and uncertain. But the flagship held. And then it moved. Not in confusion. Not in error. In response. Commander, Mara said, voice tight. It's targeting. The massive vessel pivoted, its orientation shifting toward Earth. Red light intensified along its structure, gathering at points that pulsed with growing energy. They're adapting, Solis said. The disruption isn't enough to stop them. Elias straightened. Then we escalate. He turned to the command crew. Bring all systems online, he said. Weapons hot. No more hiding. Blue icons flared back to life across the display as human ships powered up, shedding their false submission. Target the flagship, Elias continued. All available fire. Mara hesitated. That's a direct engagement. I'm aware. Solis looked at him. We're not ready for that. We're out of time, Elias said. On the main screen, the flagship's weapons charged, aimed at the distant blue sphere of Earth. Elias keyed the command channel. All units, he said, voice steady. This is Commander Rain. The enemy is compromised, but not defeated. We strike now, or we don't get another chance. He paused, then added, Follow me in. Engines flared across the human fleet. They surged forward. And at the center of the storm, the flagship waited. The distance between decision and consequence collapsed into seconds. Engines burned across the human fleet as ships surged out of Earth's defensive perimeter, no longer dimmed, no longer pretending submission. Blue signatures flared bright against the fractured red formation ahead. The void between them shrank fast, filled with momentum and intent. Range closing, Mara reported. Her voice held steady, but her grip on the console tightened. Enemy flagship still charging. On the main display, the colossal vessel dominated everything. It no longer drifted at the center of a perfect pattern. Now it stood alone, anchored, deliberate, unshaken by the disorder rippling through its fleet. Around it, alien ships struggled to reorient. Some regained alignment, snapping back into formation with mechanical precision. Others lagged, caught in the interference Solis had unleashed. Collisions had thinned their numbers, but not enough. They're stabilizing, Solis said, scanning the incoming data. The disruption is degrading. They're isolating compromised nodes. Elias watched the flagship instead. Then we end this before they recover. He opened a direct fleet-wide channel. All strike groups, concentrate fire on the primary target, he said. Ignore escorts unless engaged. We break the head, the body follows. A chorus of acknowledgments answered him, clipped and controlled. No fear in their voices now. Only focus. The first exchange came without warning. A line of red energy lanced from the flagship, cutting through space with surgical precision. One of Earth's forward destroyers vanished mid-burn, its hull dissolving into incandescent fragments. Mara inhaled sharply. Direct hit. Elias didn't react outwardly. Adjust vectors. Keep moving. Human ships scattered, breaking formation into irregular attack paths. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't coordinated in the way the alien fleet had been. It was unpredictable. Fighters darted ahead in loose clusters, weaving between larger vessels. Carriers deployed drones in wide arcs, saturating the space between fleets with shifting targets. Missile volleys launched in staggered waves, not synchronized, not clean, just constant. Solis watched the patterns form and dissolve. They're compensating, she said. But not fast enough. Because they expect order, Elias replied. We don't give it to them. Another blast from the flagship tore through a cruiser, splitting it along its spine. Debris scattered, spinning out into the chaos. Loss confirmed, Mara said, voice quieter now. Elias closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, then opened them again. Keep pressure on. The distance closed further. Human weapons began to land. Railgun slugs struck the flagship's outer plating, sparking against armor that absorbed most of the impact. Energy beams followed, probing for weak points, searching for any sign of vulnerability. At first, there was none. Then Solis leaned forward. Wait there. She highlighted a section along the flagship's lower structure. Power fluctuations. Their internal systems are compensating for the disruption. That area is overloaded. Elias focused on the marked point. A faint flicker, barely visible. Can we exploit it? If we hit it hard enough, she said. It might cascade. Might isn't certainty, Mara muttered. It's all we have, Elias said. He switched channels again. All units, adjust targeting. Coordinates uploading now. Concentrate fire on designated section. The fleet responded instantly. Missiles curved toward the new target. Beam weapons converged, striking the same point again and again. Kinetic rounds hammered the weakened plating, each impact chipping away at something that had seemed untouchable moments before. The flagship reacted. Its surface shifted, panels realigning to reinforce the damaged area. Energy surged, attempting to stabilize the breach. But the disruption still lingered, threading through its systems like static. It couldn't compensate perfectly. Damage is accumulating, Solis said. Slowly. Not fast enough, Elias replied. The flagship's weapons charged again. This time, the beams swept across the human formation, not a precise strike but a wide arc. 2 frigates disintegrated. A carrier lost its forward section, spinning out of control. Casualties rising, Mara said. Elias made the call. Prepare final approach. She turned to him. Commander, we're not breaking that hull from a distance, he said. We need to get inside its defensive envelope. That's a suicide run. Elias met her gaze. It's the only run that works. Solis understood first. You're going in to deliver the strike directly. Elias nodded once. Close enough that their systems can't deflect or disperse the impact. Mara shook her head. You don't have to lead it. Yes, I do. There was no argument left after that. He switched to the command frequency. Flagship group with me, he said. We're punching through. A small cluster of ships broke from the main assault, accelerating toward the enemy's core. Elias's command vessel led the charge, engines flaring at maximum output. The distance vanished. Point defense fire from the flagship erupted, filling the space ahead with streaks of red. One escort ship took a direct hit and vanished. Another spun away, crippled. Elias held course. Keep moving, he said. No deviation. Mara's hands moved across the controls, adjusting trajectory by fractions. We're inside the perimeter. Target locked? Elias asked. Solis nodded. Yes, but the window's closing. Their systems are stabilizing. Then we don't wait. The command vessel surged forward, closing the final gap. The damaged section of the flagship loomed ahead, a jagged scar along its otherwise flawless surface. Final strike package ready, Mara said. Elias exhaled once, steady and controlled. Transmit targeting data to all remaining units, he said. Synchronize on my mark. The channel filled with acknowledgments. He looked at the display one last time, the fleet behind him, Earth beyond it, the enemy ahead. We were never meant to survive this, he said quietly. Mara glanced at him. Then why are we still here? Elias allowed himself the faintest smile. Because we don't follow expectations. He leaned forward. Mark. The strike launched. Every remaining weapon in range fired at once. Missiles, beams, kinetic rounds, all converged on the weakened section of the flagship at the exact moment Elias's vessel reached optimal proximity. The impact was instantaneous. The damaged plating gave way. Energy surged inward, feeding into already unstable systems. The disruption Solis had introduced spread through the breach, amplifying the overload. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the flagship tore itself apart from within. Light erupted along its structure, bright enough to outshine the distant sun. Sections of the hull fractured, breaking free in massive chunks. The central core flared, collapsed, and detonated in a cascading chain reaction that ripped through the entire vessel. The shockwave expanded outward, slamming into nearby ships, scattering them like debris. On the human side, vessels braced against the blast, some failing, others holding. When the light faded, the flagship was gone. Only fragments remained. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Mara's voice broke the silence. They're retreating. On the display, the remaining alien ships pulled back. Formation abandoned, coordination fractured, they turned away from Earth and accelerated toward the outer system. They're leaving, she repeated, disbelief creeping in. Solis leaned back, eyes wide. We did it. Elias didn't answer immediately. He watched the red markers shrink, one by one, until they were distant points against the void. Only then did he speak. "We survived," he said. Behind him, the command room exhaled as one. Relief came quietly, not as celebration but as release. Outside, the battlefield drifted in silence, wreckage, scattered ships, and the faint glow of a world that still existed. Hours later, as emergency operations began and survivors were accounted for, a new transmission arrived. Not forced. Not imposed. Requested. Elias accepted. The image that appeared was not Vacor. A different figure stood in a chamber of light, its form less severe, its gaze measured. "Humanity," it said, voice calm. "Your species has been reclassified." Elias said nothing. "You were evaluated as a developing civilization," the figure continued. "That assessment was incorrect." A pause. "You are now designated as an unpredictable entity. Further engagement will proceed with caution." The transmission ended. No threat. No ultimatum. Just acknowledgement. Elias stood in the quiet that followed, watching Earth turn slowly beneath him. They had been measured. They had refused. And now, for the first time, they had been seen.